The thing is the writing is what saved me. You had I was listening to the episode with the poet Alex Murdoch that he was on your
Mm,
show, and something that he said was just, I just resonated with me so much is that when I was a little girl, and as I said, I was abused in the house. So
mhm,
we
mhm,
grew up in an old colonial home,
mhm.
you know, 3 stories. And I would
Oh,
go up in the attic, and not too many people came up there after me because I felt safe because the stairs were very narrow and very hard
oh.
for an old, an
Mhm.
adult to get up, right? But
Yeah, uh-huh.
I would look out the fanlight window and just write little verses. I mean, just
Mhm,
as just the
mhm.
mysteries of the planet.
Welcome to Story Power, a bi monthly podcast where my guests and I chat about stories and creativity in all different styles and formats. My name is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden, and my goal is to promote what Dale Carnegie stated in his famous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. He said, instead of condemning people, let's try to understand them. Let's try to figure out why they do what they do. That's a lot more profitable and intriguing than criticism, and it breeds sympathy, tolerance, and kindness. To know all is to forgive all. It's my firm belief that the goal of most creative people is to try to understand themselves and others. That's what makes artwork of all kinds so compelling. But more than that, the personal stories of my guests promote understanding as well. Roger C. Schenck, a cognitive scientist, said human beings are not ideally set up to understand logic. They are ideally set up to understand stories. It's my hope that Story Power will help us understand each other better by sharing the stories of my guests. Today is Story Power episode 108, and I am talking to Karen Coccioli. Did I say that right? I did. Oh, those Italian names. I'm very sensitive about making sure I get people's names right. So, Karen, I am so excited to have you on the show and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. I really am.
Oh, good. Now, I was reading that you live in Kansas. Where do you live?
Oh my goodness. Yes. Yeah. I landed here quite by accident 6 years ago. And I live in a town called Prairie Village. But actually, it's right outside of Kansas City Metro.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
So, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
So
cool.
it was a culture shock growing up in New York City, New
Uh,
Jersey, living on the West Coast. It was quite a shock for a while, but
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I'm here. I'm still here
Yes.
yet.
Oh, cool. Well, I have in-laws who live in Independence, Missouri, so
Oh my
not
goodness.
too far from you. Yes, yes. And my husband's brother and his wife went to KU in Lawrence.
Oh my goodness.
So
Oh, that's a
yes.
university, actually. Yeah,
Mhm.
it is. It is. And it is a university town. I live near KCMO, which is like the University of Kansas, the Missouri side.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of professors, a lot of professional people, arty, very, very, very artsy,
Oh, that's neat.
the area here. So,
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah. So, beautiful place, even though it's flat. And I grew up in the Pacific Northwest where there's lots of mountains. So, when I went to college in Iowa, it was like the sun came up and the sun went down, and I'm not used to that because it would go down behind the mountains and we would have long twilights, but not in the Midwest.
well, I'm actually looking forward to going back to the West Coast again. I do miss the ocean.
Oh yes,
I miss
yes.
being near the water.
Yeah, we live in Arizona and I miss that too. So let's get down to I am so excited to hear about your story. How you, first off, how you figured out that you were LGBTQ, which I almost always get that wrong. Um, a- and then your book and tell about your book and then how did you get a PhD in comparative literature, and what is that all about? So,
So, okay, so I knew I knew that I was attracted to women in eighth grade
uh-huh, uh-huh.
when I had a crush on a gal in my class, another Italian,
Oh, really?
Rosemary. I'll never I even remember her last name, but I won't say it. But it's so I've always known that, but my I came from a very traditional conservative Italian family.
Mm,
My father was Sicilian. My mother came from northern Italy. It was a kind of family that my father actually was raised with his father having the belt across his lap during dinners, so if any one of the kids got out of yeah, exactly. If
whoa.
walked out of line, or they would get the strap right at dinner. So I actually had a very abusive childhood,
Mm,
very abusive for my father. I think just his, the remnants of his own upbringing
mhm, mhm.
carried over to him being a dad. And my parents had me late in life when they were 40, which is unusual because
Oh,
Lucinda, I am your age. I'm actually a few years older than you. So I
oh, wow.
was listening to one of the episodes where the gal you were talking to, and she embraced the fact that, at your age, and she's saying you have decades to do so much more, and I feel the same. But because of my upbringing, it really hardwired my brain in a really
Mm,
very ordinary uh, different ways.
mhm,
When I just needed to kind of go the path that I was supposed to go, and
mhm,
that's
mhm,
what I did for many years. So it wasn't until my 20s, and I was married at the time to a man,
mhm,
and I would go to New York City and go to the lesbian bars and
mhm, mhm,
just to try. And I knew it was home. I mean, I remember the first time I walked into a woman's bookshop in New York City and just felt, just breathed a sigh that this is kind of where I belong.
yeah. Now, I'm heterosexual, but I have been reading for several years books by women. And I think that women's stories just have a very different energy than men's stories. It's not better or worse, but yeah. So I can kind of understand that feeling of being at home with, with your people. Everybody needs to find their people, I think. Doesn't
Yeah, I did. It did, and it took me years and years and a lot of therapy to finally now, once I came out, I mean, by the time I came out, I have two sons, and they were older, and
mhm,
they said, they already knew, but the thing is the writing is what saved me. I was listening to the episode with the poet Alex Murdoch that he was on your
mm,
show, and something that he said was just, I just resonated with me so much, is that when I was a little girl, and as I said, I was abused in the house. So
mhm,
we
mhm,
grew up in an old colonial home, uh,
mhm.
you know, 3 stories. And I would
Oh,
go up in the attic, and not too many people came up there after me because I felt safe, because the stairs were very narrow and very hard
oh.
for an old, an adult to get up, right? But
Yeah, uh-huh.
I would look out the fanlight window and just write little verses. I mean,
Mhm,
just the
mhm,
mysteries of the planet, just feeling a bit safe. So for me, the writing is very entwined with who I am as a
mhm,
queer person, as a writer, as a,
mhm, mhm,
it's just so much in the identity that
mhm,
it's very hard. I can't say that I'm a writer and not someone, it's just
mhm,
very intricate.
mhm. Yeah, it's one of the things that defines you. Is that what you mean?
Oh, yes, yes. I cannot go any time, any length of time without writing. I really
Mm,
face. I mean,
Mhm.
I think that the writing really, um, it, like I said, it's a safe, it's a safe place, but it's just where I create the life that I want to live in.
Yeah. I kind of understand that because I didn't start keeping a journal until I was 24. I didn't start college until I was 22. And when my first major was music, but I wasn't really a musician, but I took in that first semester I took an introduction to religion class
Mhm.
and just loved it. I loved it because of the stories, the ancient
Mhm.
stories and the myths and stuff. And so I changed my major to that. Well, I was the only woman in the major, and so I was facing a lot of difficulty. And one of my instructors, and I think it had to be the instructor that I was like his assistant,
Mhm.
said, "Go buy a notebook and start writing." And that's also so I did that. He suggested that in the spring right before I went home after my second year. And then when I was home, I took some classes at the local community college in Bremerton, the Olympic Community College. And one of them was interpersonal relations taught by a theater guy. And he said, "Have you ever thought about getting involved in theater at your college?" And I said, "No." But I had always had an interest in that, because I went to these really small schools and they'd have like the junior or the senior play, and I'd try out for them. I never got a part, but I'd work backstage and it was fun.
Right?
So I started theater and journaling about the same time, and those two things saved me.
They really are. In my kitchen, I still have when I was young, maybe 4 or 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the Italian kitchen, would be my mother, my grandmother. They'd be cooking, and I'd be, in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I still have the books. I'm 74, so these books
Mm-hmm.
are like over, about 65, 70 years old. And inside the covers, I would never write on the recipes. I would never write on anything else, but inside the covers are all my little verses
Oh, that's so cool.
and images of of the women that in the kitchen with me. and
Oh, yeah.
and like I said, I still have him, and I pick him up every now and then, and it was just like, again, it's that sense of tactile
Yes.
in
Uh-oh.
so many different forms, actually.
Mm-hmm. We're having a little internet issues today, but so far everything's good. Sometimes it freezes. So yeah, so those books are like, yeah, the what you wrote and the images that brings back really great memories, I imagine.
It does. It does. Because as I said, it was, I mean, words are, and I write this in my book Paradise, actually, which is a
Mhm.
hybrid memoir.
Mhm. Mhm.
Me growing up. All the past is true.
Mhm.
And it really does bring up it's just a safe place. It reminds me of where I started,
Mm.
and I wanted to be a poet until I read Little Women, and I swore I was Joe.
Oh yeah, really.
And then after that, I read Hemingway, and
Mhm.
the Old Man the Sea is still my favorite novella of all times. And so,
Mhm.
and then I got into the stories. But the first line of Paradise, or actually the not the first line, the preface, there's a line in it, a quote by Anais Nin, and it is, "We write to taste life in the moment
Ah,
and in retrospection," right?
yes.
Because, and it's like you're saying with the journal, isn't
Mhm.
it? And then the last line of my book is, the very last line is, "I'll never be silenced again." I didn't realize how until the editor got a hold of the book and she said, "And through the tears, and I'm reading this story," and how I circled back, and I didn't even
Mhm.
realize it until the editor actually brought it to my attention. So
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
really is, I guess, my message in all my writing is,
Yeah.
you said something before, and it was, women's stories are so important, but we're not heard. a lot,
Right.
especially when there's abuse involved and when there's trauma
Mm-hmm.
involved. Not everybody likes to read about it. They don't like to
Mm-hmm.
hear about it, but it's important for us to tell it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and a lot of the writers that I talk to or that I read, like I just finished reading Lilith. It's a novel about Lilith, the first wife of Adam, and how she was created by the god of the, well, his name is Yahweh, but the god of the garden. And there are lots of other gods in the story, but she was Lilith was created by Ashara, his wife. And so it was they were created to be equal of each other. Adam and Lilith were, but I think one of the first lines is, "I should have known something was wrong when he started planning or he started thinking," something like that. And so she has eaten of not only the tree of knowledge but the tree of life, and so she is immortal.
I have to
And
read that. I have
it
to read
is. Oh, yes, it's so fabulous. And it only came out at the end of last year. So it's fairly new. I found it at the library on, well, I have both. Hoopla is where I found it, but I also have the other one that,
right.
the libraries, Libby.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was so fabulous because it's telling the progression of how the patriarchy grew, because it wasn't all cultures yet, but
Right.
it just grew and grew and grew and grew. And how she's fighting to try to get equality back for women. And then in the end, and she is supported by, and I can't remember his name, but he's a fallen angel who has loved her from the very beginning when she was first created. And he does all these things to help her. And
Mhm.
in the end, they just go back to, spoiler alert, they go back to the garden that is now a whole mess, but the trees are still there and they eat of the tree of life again and they die. But it is like the opening of women and men becoming more equal
Oh
again.
my goodness.
So it's really interesting and I loved it. And that's the kind of book that I like, where or even stories. I just watched Damsel and it starts like this, something like uh um the main character saying there are plenty of stories where the knight saves the damsel from the dragon. This is not one of those stories. So I'm into this kind of stories where women save themselves. So yeah, and it doesn't it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be where they hate men, but
Mhm.
you know, they are they're finding their voice, like you said. They're finding their voice.
Yes, 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 and that's what it's. I mean, I think that's a lot what it's about, right?
Mhm, mhm,
Is exploring yourself. You're
mhm,
learning about others. I think in writing and when we do look at things in retrospection, especially, you never remember the thing the way it really happened, right? Every time you say from something, an experience, you're always kind of modifying it and changing it.
mhm,
How you're evolving,
mhm.
things are different, and I think the whole idea of telling the stories a lot is in helping us to understand others,
Yes. Oh,
right?
yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if you really want to, sure, I want my books to be a bestseller, but it's honestly not why I write.
Mhm,
I write to tell a story. I
mhm,
have to tell stories. So this is,
mhm,
I'm on my working on my 10th book now, and it's, I just write to tell stories.
mhm. Yeah, right. Well, that's I'm working on my second book, which is a sequel to the first book.
Oh,
But
You broke up. You're only working on your what?
Second book, which is
Uh-huh.
a sequel to my first book. And there are probably only going to be two of in that. But I started writing a blog in 2013 just because I don't have a degree in writing. It's theater. And so I needed to learn how to write.
Mhm. Great.
So for consumption, I mean, for people to
Right.
understand what I was talking about. And so I keep that up. I only publish it once a week, but so those are the essay kinds of things. And I am thinking of writing a memoir of why stories are so important to me. And it has to do with the fact that my parents were very smart. They instituted a movie night where we would watch movies together and talk about them and talk about what the characters were doing and who were our favorite characters. And then my brother and then younger sisters got to ask questions about, oh, why is this character doing this? And then our parents could say, well, maybe they're doing it because of this or because of this or because of this. And so when things would happen to me out in the real world, I could go, oh, yeah, I could take a step back and go, oh, maybe that person's doing that, yelling because of this or this or this.
Fortunate you were to have parents to do that. That
Mhm.
is amazing. I mean, that
Mhm.
really is very fortunate. I mean, what a role models to have.
Yeah. Well, my father was very, very intelligent about human nature, and he had dyslexia. So reading out loud was really difficult for him. He had to teach himself how to read. But, when we got a little older, my mom and dad did encourage us to read. So my mom loved romances and mysteries. And so she was putting those into my hands. My brother wasn't really very interested in reading, but what did was they subscribed to Sports Illustrated for him. And that's how they got him interested in reading. So they were really, really smart.
Yeah.
And I have used movies in my when I was teaching English or theater. I would use those as a way to help students see one person can make a difference
Yes.
or whatever. And when I was teaching English, it was at Douglas, Arizona, which is about an hour from us, and it's a border town.
Mhm.
So a lot of the students spoke Spanish as their first language. And so we would read the stories out loud in class and then discuss them and, plays and that kind of thing. And it was, I think it really helped them um, understand themselves better, understand the English language better. Uh, you know, all it,
Because they're hearing they're yeah, and stories are relatable. I used to my background university teaching, but I was my last job before I gave it up to do writing full time. I was a director of education at a nonprofit, and it
mm,
was to teach adults, help adults get their GED, right, their
mhm,
high school
mhm,
equivalency,
mhm,
test. And we had a lot of students that were here in Kansas City who were immigrants. So a lot of
mhm,
them English was a second language, and I had them read um, The Old Man and the Sea, and
mm,
like you're saying, we read it out loud,
mhm.
and all the other instructors and even my supervisor was like, Karen, they're never going to understand that. I mean, like, what are you doing? And I'm saying, "No, we'll wait and see."
Mhm.
And we read it, and then of course, I mean, at the end, and they related because the old man in the sea, the person is poor.
Right,
Sometimes he's hungry. Has to go out
right,
fishing.
right.
He's got struggles in his life, and
Yeah, and they love that.
yes, they did.
Yes,
They loved it. Loved it because I think sometimes you not degrade, but I mean, sometimes just because a person doesn't have is a second language speaker or doesn't have a high school education doesn't mean that they don't have a sense of instinct for, what's
Mhm.
going on. And I related it to their life, right? How many of
Mhm.
you have ever been without a job? How many of you have gone hungry?
Mhm.
So it's just to your point that I think
Right.
reading the stories out loud and passing them on
Mhm.
it is important. It's
Yeah.
critical.
Yes, that was one of the ones that I was teaching American Lit. So that's one of the ones we read. And I love the relationship between the boy and the old man.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, so beautiful. So beautiful. Yeah. So that is one of my favorites too. I can't say that I'm a real big fan of Ernest Hemingway, but I love that. I love that book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. And, if my dad had been able to, he would have read out loud to us. My mom was really great at expressing herself when because my dad was a minister and she would help him and she would do readings in worship services and stuff like that. And oh man, she had a really great expressive way of reading. So I think that's kind of where I got it. Yeah. So, um, the in my head when I'm reading the stories, I'm, I hear how they're saying what their dialogue is. I hear a version of, oh, well, this is how they're expressing themselves. But that's all from my theater background. Yeah, the descriptions that's why I like to, if it's going to be a movie, I like to watch the movie first and then read the book because it fills in the blanks. The book fills in the blanks. Although I have, with classic movies, I've done it the other way. I've read the book after because, the book was written in the 1940s or something, but it's fun. It's fun to because they're two different mediums, and I love having pictures in my head when I'm reading the book. So
I do. When I'm writing, I definitely have pictures, and I mean,
Mhm.
there's a reel going. I could, almost see it
Mhm.
as a movie in my head.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
So I want to know a little bit about the comparative lit. Um, uh, what does that entail? That education?
Oh, so my studies were quite interesting because I was going to Montclair College in New Jersey, and I
Mm.
started when I was in my late 20s.
Uh huh.
And I there was the University of Hong Kong, which
Oh.
was under the auspices of the British government,
Uh
right?
huh.
The Hong Kong,
Oh,
they,
right. Yeah.
they didn't change over until 1996.
Right.
This was back in 1990. And so they were looking for native English speakers,
Mm.
preferably from America or Canada. And one of my professors, English professor, she said, "Would you want to do this?"
Mhm.
And I did, and I was accepted. So I actually had all my studies at the University of Hong Kong, um,
Oh.
which was quite an experience because unlike here in America, I was actually paid. So
Oh.
I went through my bachelor's degree, my master's, and my doctorate, and I got paid for doing it. And
Wow.
all I had to do was, I know, and I had professors from Oxford and Cambridge,
Mhm.
and they paid so high that we had like the best of professors from the United States coming
Mhm. Mhm.
over. So comparative literature, what they did is you only studied your major. You didn't have to do math or science, or which in
Mhm.
some
Mhm.
ways has negatives. But I actually focused on gender studies and
Mm.
sexuality
Mm.
and
Mhm.
madness in women's private writing.
Mhm.
So comparative literature is just studying literature of the world, cultures. But my focus, they back then they didn't have a doctorate in gender studies at the time,
Mm.
So
Mhm. Mhm.
that really is my background. I did my PhD actually on Elizabeth Bishop. a
Mm.
critical analysis of poet Elizabeth Bishop. So
Oh, oh.
yeah, it was fascinating. It was a fascinating. My degree was stellar. I mean, my studies were just stellar. We studied philosophy and feminism
Mm,
and
mhm,
psychology and religion.
mhm,
Uh,
mhm,
Mary Magdalene is one of my favorite biblical figures.
mhm,
You know,
mm,
so we had all the subjects having to do with
mhm,
our major. Very
mhm,
interesting, very interesting. We went all year round.
mhm.
It was very different than United States, but such an experience. And then after that, I actually taught in Saudi Arabia for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, at a women's at a girls' college until one
Mhm.
day they decided that they were going to close the college down. So
Oh, oh
but
dear.
I've had some very good experiences.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, my husband and I took a trip circumnavigating the globe in 1996, and we didn't go to Hong Kong. I kind of wish we had, but yeah, it was only 3 months. But I would like to live outside the United States for a while. I think that would be really great. My sister and her husband, he speaks Spanish fluently, want to move to Spain when they retire. At
Oh,
least for
oh, yeah.
part of the
Spain
year.
would be beautiful. Spain would. I
Mhm.
lived in Hong Kong for 9 years, and it did get it did get very it's very crowded, right? It's
Mm,
just very, very crowded and loud and noise.
mm.
You know,
Yeah.
s-
See,
but I get what you're saying
mhm,
about living outside for a time.
mhm,
I would like to do that. I think that would be a wonderful
mhm,
experience. So where was your favorite country?
mhm. We liked England, the Netherlands, and I think my husband liked it too, Greece. We liked Greece a lot. Of course, I wanted to go to Epidavros to the theater there, but then Pop and Draft died, so we didn't get to go there. So we have to go back and see that theater so that I can stand down on the thing and whisper and have Barry hear me way up in the.
I do want to go to Greece too. I think going to Greece, but I love London.
Yeah,
I love London.
yeah, yeah. We were in Glastonbury mostly, but yes, it's a beautiful country, and we have friends in Australia. So we went to Australia after India, and I thought Barry was going to kiss the ground when we got to Australia because being in India was a real culture shock and very difficult. We didn't know anyone there. Every place else in France, every place else we had contacts or somebody that we were friends of ours.
I
My sister and her husband lived in Japan, and that was our last. We went east and
Mhm.
and went, and so not having anybody in India, it was difficult. But
Yeah. I would
I
imagine.
I think I'd like to go back again. So we have about 6 minutes left. Do you have anything else that I have not asked you that you want to talk about?
I would like to just, am I allowed to promote my book at all?
Oh yes. And also you have a line of books that you write under a pen name. I want you to talk about those too for a little bit.
Yes. So, yeah, Paradise, I have two books under my name, and
Mhm,
Paradise actually is available. I'm an indie publisher, so all
mhm.
my books are only available on Amazon, except Paradise actually was taken by Dreamscape Audiobooks.
Oh.
So actually Paradise you could get it, and actually Hoopla, Libby,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
any of the so anyone who wants, I actually on my Instagram account you can actually today I posted and you can listen to a 2-minute sampling of
Oh,
it.
that's
That
cool.
would be great.
Yeah.
But yes, I also write under so those books are more informed by my academic studies,
Mhm,
the
mhm,
books I write under my name.
mhm,
And then I also write queer erotica, and that's
mhm.
under author Annie Moon. And I have a couple of series under those books. So, but every single one of my books has a message.
Yes.
There's always a message, even in the romance with the happily ever after
Yeah.
endings, which they always have. But there is, like I have my uh, book that's going to come out actually at the end of the month. It's called Branded. The one previous was called Touch, and it's about
Mhm.
the having the phobia of hapaphobia, where you're
Mhm.
fearful of touching or being touched.
Mhm.
And the premise is what happens if you fall in love with someone but you can't touch them.
Yes.
So, you
Yeah.
just kind of think about that for a second. So
Right.
there is always some type of psychological plot that's going on
That's
with the.
cool. Yeah, that's cool. Yes. So I saw on your website that you said, this was going to air on April 4th, and we're just recording it today. But I am going to put this on my Patreon community and I'll make it public. And so I'll send you the link and you can put that on your
Oh,
website.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
I appreciate.
Because because this doesn't even air until August 28th.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Put
So
that down.
so I want and I need something for my Patreon community. My mom died in at the end of February and poor Patreon people.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
I've neglected them. Yeah, she was 91 and she was we kind of expected it because she'd been declining ever since we had this big 90th birthday party for her on the Oregon coast, and ever since then she's been declining. So I was, kind of expecting it, and well, we all were. Um, but she was a great lady, and just going through the process of going through photographs. She had boxes and boxes of photographs, and we went up to my sister's house, and we went through the boxes of photographs together, and we found all these photographs of she and her sister when they were children, and she and her parents, and all these wonderful things, and it just brought up all these stories about her, and yeah, and my sister found this book, a retirement book, where people wrote things to her about what it was like to work with her and things. It was just all of that was just so cool. So yeah. Well, I am so glad that we got to talk to each other, and thank you so much for being my guest.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very, very, very much. As you made my debut, awesome. It was an amazing experience. So you really put me at ease, and I loved it. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the show. If you like what you heard, please share it with a friend and give us a rating and or review on your favorite podcast app. It will help people find us. I invite you to join my Patreon community at patreon.com/storypower, all one word. Or if you like, you can subscribe to Story Power on Apple Podcasts. It's my aim to build a community where we discuss the stories we love and talk about what we learned from them. I offer extra audio content and story suggestions to my patrons on both platforms. Remember, as Philip Pullman said, after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. Let's spread the story love. Until next time, this is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden. Thanks for listening.